Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Ideal Scope in Action. My name is John Pollard. I am the Senior Director of Education for the International Gemological Institute, an educational advisor for PriceScope.com, and your host for the In the Loop webinar series. By way of introduction, PriceScope is the world's largest diamond and jewelry community with over 100,000 registered members teaching consumers how to buy diamonds for more than 20 years. Today's topic covers the Ideal Scope, a gemological tool that can be used to assess diamond brightness and beauty, much the same way a gemological microscope can be used to assess diamond clarity and transparency. Today's session is focused strictly on diamond cut quality. You'll get the most out of this session if you're already familiar with the 4 C's in general and have done some diamond shopping in person. We'll begin with a quick explanation of a persistent cut quality quandary, use illustrations and a short video to show the Ideal Scope in action. After that, Mr. Garry Holloway, who developed this tool, will join us live from the land down under, and we'll bring on PriceScope's Diamond Concierge, Dave Atlas, for advice about finding well-cut diamonds online. Throughout the session, we invite your questions. We've scheduled time to address them at the end, and we will be choosing some folks at random to receive a little gift. More on that later. So, what is the cut quality quandary? Simply stated, cut is the redheaded stepchild of diamond grading. All of its 4 C's siblings are treated uniformly when grading diamonds. Every reputable authority, from worldwide grading laboratories to independent appraisers, uses the same methodology, the same terminology, and the same essential standards for carat, color, and clarity assessment. Cut assessment has none of that in common. Standards vary, terminology varies, even fundamental approaches are different. Imagine treating carat weight that way. Imagine the same diamond getting reported as 1.4 carats, 280 milligrams, or 42 zaphods, depending on what organization graded it. Human observation is awesome. It is actually the best way to assess a diamond. Of course, if you could see every single diamond in person, that would be great. Just remember the L's of human observation. That's lighting, lighting, lighting. You're always going to want to take it from one place to another to see how it performs. Human observation is the best method by far. As they say, the eyes have it. Mechanical assessment. This is another method. It's essentially putting a diamond in a box, flashing lights at it, and counting pixels. There are more sophisticated versions than that, but there's no standardization, and some have little relevance to real-world observations. More importantly, producers can game those systems by cutting to whatever proportions a particular box has been designed to reward, whether that's relevant to the real world or not. Ideal Scope's method is passive science. It follows what actually happens to light when it enters a diamond. It does make the assumption that light is primarily coming from above, but that methodology has passed scientific peer review. It's most useful with round brilliant diamonds, and it works identically with natural and lab-grown diamonds. So let's see Ideal Scope in action. This is the passive science behind Ideal Scope. It's quite simple, really. When placed over a diamond, it creates a structured light environment, which allows interpretations of basic light behavior, including brightness, leakage, and contrast. Let's define those basic light behavior components. Depending on how it was cut, light entering a diamond will either reflect and come up to the viewer's eyes as brightness, or escape through the bottom as leakage or windowing, causing dark areas. When placed over a diamond, light passing through the Ideal Scope's cone turns red. Light that reflects inside the diamond and travels up is brightness. So a viewer looking through the lens will see bright areas as red. In Ideal Scope cut quality assessment, reliably bright areas are interpreted as red. Now let's talk about leakage. If light entering the diamond escapes through the bottom of the stone, that's leakage or windowing, because the cutting angles cause those facets to act as windows at the bottom rather than mirrors. A viewer looking through the Ideal Scope will actually see through the bottom of the diamond. Professional setups use a lighted panel under the diamond, which makes leakage more obvious. So in Ideal Scope cut quality assessment, a viewer will see areas of leakage as white or light pink. Again, looking at diamonds in ideal scope, brightness is red, leakage is white. That brings us to contrast, which is a less discussed but vital component of diamond beauty. Some light from above will always be blocked by the viewer. This is going to create a pattern of darkness. You can see the contrast effect in diamond photos because the camera blocks light the same way a viewer does. In fact, contrast in diamond photos is really dark because the diamond is reflecting the black camera lens that's directly above it. The on and off contrast effect when diamonds move is a dramatic component of scintillation. Remember, diamonds are not usually held still. They move. As they do, the diamond's areas of brightness and contrast, they will drive how vivid the scintillation is because as it moves, those areas swap back and forth, creating the suite of colored and white flashes and areas of darkness that we see as sparkle. In ideal scope cut quality assessment, the contrast pattern is black. So let's look at it in action. First of all, you can use ideal scope like a loupe. Now, for proper analysis, the diamond's girdle needs to be aligned with the bottom of the scope, and a consistent, bright, white, even background should serve as backlighting. For the best consistency in viewing and for taking photographs, gemologists will place diamonds in a transparent holder placed on top of a lighted panel. I saw a question come in about strength of backlighting. In the laboratory, I use 5,000 Kelvin, which is cool white daylight equivalent. The transparent holder is step drilled with 45 graduated sinks. They'll accommodate, in my setup, diamonds spreading from 3 millimeters to 11 millimeters, essentially 10 pointers to 5 carats. Now, let's see what the gemologist sees when using ideal scope. We're going to use these stones. We use them to teach why cut quality assessment is important in a number of places on the PriceScope website. Now, under jewelry store spotlights, they both seem big and bright. We have an 80 pointer on the left and a 1 carat stone on the right. Now, if you saw both of these stones in a store where they're lighted to best effect and they both cost the same amount, you might be tempted to buy the 1 carat stone. Let's see them in ideal scope first. Okay, looking into the stone on the left, red is brightness, and you can see red here from edge to edge and all across the center. The red is constant and unbroken by areas of white leakage, and the black contrast pattern is balanced and symmetrical. This is a stone cut with desirable angles that will be at its brightest in all lighting conditions. Again, I want to mention that we made these with an iPhone. Okay, on the right, the 1 carat stone, even before we focus, you can see it's lacking red in many areas. Once it comes to focus, you see windowing or leakage around the edges and even under the center. The black contrast pattern is unbalanced and it even pools in the center. Even though it looked good under store spotlights, this is not a well-cut stone. So in the jewelry store, under spotlights, they both look good. But this is why it's important to remember the L of lighting whenever you shop for diamonds. To that end, here are the same stones photographed in normal lighting. Now you're going to see that the deficits, which you saw in ideal scope, really do show up. The 1 carat stone loses brightness at the edges, and it even appears visually smaller than the 80 pointer, even though it's actually physically larger. This is why it matters to diamond shoppers. Nearly 70% of all round diamonds receive the top cut grade of excellent from the world's major labs, but 80% of natural diamonds graded excellent have performance deficits that can be seen in ideal scope. I'm going to quickly go through some examples. These will come 1 to 5 from best to worst. Here's number 1. This is the one we saw in the video. And essentially, you've got lots of red brightness, a balanced and symmetrical contrast pattern, and no meaningful leakage. The tiny white areas that are at the girdle and where facets meet are expected. They're neutral areas. Number 2, this one is also a very bright stone. It's got nice symmetrical contrast. The contrast pattern is not necessarily as precise as the other, but that's not an assessment here. We're making a brightness assessment. Here, we still have symmetrical contrast. We've got bright at the edges, but now you're seeing a bit of light loss underneath the table. So in some low lighting scenarios, this is not going to be as bright as the previous two examples. And now here, you can see the contrast pattern is very asymmetrical. It's not balanced, and you've got big areas of white leakage seen under the table. This diamond is going to look dark when you take it into lighting conditions that are normal or low lit. And then, of course, this was the example that we used before that we've already discussed. What's important to understand is that the first four will receive the same cut grade from the world's most major laboratories. So it's important to keep in mind that even though you're seeing an excellent cut grade, again, it's the red-headed stepchild, it's not treated the same way in every location, and the methodologies for assessment are different. So I hope that's useful to know. At this point, I'm going to invite the developer of IdealScope to join us. He's a graduate in diamond technology from the Gemological Association of Australia, the owner of Holloway Diamonds in Australia, the developer of both the IdealScope and the patented Holloway Cut Advisor, or HCA, used to assess millions of diamonds worldwide. He's a former geologist turned jeweler, cut quality specialist, lecturer, consultant, and self-proclaimed cut nut. He is Garry Holloway. Hi, Garry.
Hi, John. Hi, everybody. Welcome to all the PriceScopers and people who aren't yet PriceScopers who should be.
Well, Garry, I wanted to ask you a couple questions. First of all, can you just tell us in general, let's go back to the beginning, what inspired you to develop IdealScope? Why did you put effort into the project, and what did you plan to use it for?
They're really good questions. Firstly, having decided to leave geology as a career and be a trinket flogger, a jeweler, I decided to do the Australian Gemological course run by the Gemological Association of Australia, which back then was a very academic course, even more academic than the British course is these days. So one of the things that you had to do after you'd finished your gemology course was the diamond course, which is still called the Diploma of Diamond Technology. Very academic, and I had to do an oral thesis presentation. You had to come up with some sort of new research. So I had learned that De Beers had a fire scope in Sydney, in Australia. And I managed to get hold of it. They never asked for it back. I still have it. And I went to my diamond merchant and I went through his entire stock. Took several hours. I was only able to find one really good stone. I found plenty of really bad examples, and put together a well, PowerPoint, but it was a projector point presentation back in those days, in the late 80s, mid 80s. So I then decided that I needed to use this device for my diamond buying, for my store. And of course, that wasn't so easy because it's a big clunky thing. It's about that size, by that, by that, by that. And so I thought I need to develop a smaller portable version. So that was the first IdealScope way back in 1985. I kept it as a trade secret for a very long time until the GAA published their first article on brilliance in 1988. 1998.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was about to say it was a 98 probably, huh?
Yeah.
And then were you,
so consequently,
you kept it a trade secret. Yeah, you were basically using it for your purposes for
Yep.
selection.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And that's spectacular. So here's, now that you've gone out and about and been on every continent, and I know that you carry one of these with you everywhere you go, can you give us some real world context on the state of diamond cut quality? Meaning, how does the average diamond in the average store, in your experience, perform?
Okay, so back then, from my diamond merchant that I annoyed the hell out of, unfortunately, I had another room. After going through every stone in his entire stock, it was clear and apparent that there was only a very, very small percentage of stones that looked good through the ideal scope. So the good news is that the cut quality has got vastly better since then, because now instead of 1 in 1,000 stones, I can uniformly find around about 5 in 100. So around 5% of diamonds look good through an ideal scope. That's for round diamonds. That's what we're talking about. So the wonders of modern science, GAA introducing their cut rating system in 2005, 2006, those things have improved the possibility of people buying a nice diamond, but it's still a lottery where most consumers lose out big time.
Okay. So in general terms, you just percentage-wise, if you're in an average shop that's not focused on cut quality, then you're basically saying it's a 1 in 5, something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. There are stores that do focus on cut quality. And so if a store is carrying a brand that is known to have decent cut quality, do you increase your chances quite a bit?
Well, absolutely. Some of our sponsors on PriceScope, for example, do specialize in those standards. They charge a premium for those stones, and they do show you ideal scope images of those stones, as well as hearts and arrows and all sorts of other versions. And in fact, one of our vendors, I don't know whether I should mention them, actually uses the ideal scope as the arrows side, which is far more useful than a hearts and arrows viewer, because there are a reasonable percentage of hearts and arrows diamonds that are on the market, not from those companies that I'm talking about, that do show some leakage inside the table.
That's a good point. And by the way, for anybody who's watching, if you want to learn about the hearts and arrows style of cutting, in the PriceScope education section under advanced, there's a good page there. Hearts and arrows assessment is about precision of cutting, but it doesn't necessarily show you anything about light performance, which is the whole fundamental purpose of passive science behind ideal scope. Garry, I do want to mention that you've made sort of a differentiation between natural diamonds and lab-grown diamonds in terms of general cut quality, appearance, and ideal scope, et cetera. And you have a prediction on that topic as more and more commercial outlets and chain stores start carrying lab-grown alongside their natural diamonds. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes. So essentially, a diamond cutter is always going to try to get the heaviest carat weight that they can from a natural diamond. And what that means is that almost always there is more available depth. So the diamond is almost always going to be cut deeper than optimal. So when you cut a slightly deeper diamond with a steeper crown and a deeper pavilion angle, you're going to lose light performance. So the issue with lab-grown diamonds is that most larger lab-grown diamonds these days are being produced with CVD, and we will see more and more of that. That's chemical vapor deposition. So they start out with a layer of diamond, a natural or a synthetic diamond, and they grow on top of that. So when they get to the depth that they want, they stop to achieve the carat weight that they're after. So, for example, if you look at most 1 carat round diamonds, natural, you're going to find that most of them are approaching 4 millimeters or even deeper. Whereas if you're growing a lab-grown diamond, it's the depth that is the constraint. Why grow deeper than you need? So if you cut off where you're going to get 3.9 millimeters, that small 0.1 millimeter depth will mean that you are now going to very likely be able to cut a 1 carat diamond that will pass the ideal scope test.
So, I've just shared, Gary, so you know, the audience can now see a natural diamond octa next to a cubo octa from HPHT next to a cubic rough from CVD to understand what you're talking about.
Thank you, John. So the natural diamond, they're going to cut a tiny little piece off the top that is going to cut around about a 0.2 carat diamond. They'll saw that straight through the top so that you've got a little pyramid. And then from the rest of the stone, they will cut a 1 carat diamond. And that 1 carat diamond, you can see that there is going to be no depth constraint. They can cut it as deep as they like. The CVD diamond on the right-hand side, they will stop growing the crystal. No point growing it deeper than what you have orders for, thicker than what you have orders for, and consequently around half or more of the lab-grown diamonds that we've studied actually pass ideal scope and HCA testing. So now the prediction that I'm making, which is a result of that information, is that when people go into jewelry stores, especially the lower market jewelry stores, not the ones that John's been talking about that are doing a really good job with cut quality, the problem that they're going to have is that they're going to look at, the consumer's going to look at the lab-grown diamond, and they're going to look at the natural diamond, and they're going to choose the lab-grown diamond. So what that means is that there's going to be pressure on the natural diamonds to improve their act, to improve their game. And what's going to happen is that more and more people are going to choose lab-grown diamonds because they look better. And as a consequence, natural diamonds are going to become even rarer because there won't be as much money invested in new mines. And because the natural diamonds are going to become rarer, all of those people out there who already own natural diamonds are going to be very, very happy.
Essentially, you're saying that there's going to be a drop-off, like gem quality. The idea of gem quality in natural diamonds is going to have to go up to overcome the fact that in your, commercial outlets, your more commercial outlets, your chains, and the people who are doing bulk buying and selling I2 and I3 and clarities like this, the lab-grown option is going to be not only less expensive, it's also going to be more attractive.
Exactly. And what that means is that around about half the value of what's produced by a diamond mine is those cheaper qualities. And if those cheaper qualities become uncommercial and end up on diamond drill bits again, we're actually going to see the wealthy people who can afford a really nice natural diamond, a high color, high clarity natural diamond. A lot of mines won't be economic anymore because all mines produce predominantly industrial grade diamonds, and the boundary between industrial grade diamonds and gem quality diamonds is going to shift so that the lower quality diamonds just simply won't cut it anymore.
Okay, well, that's interesting, and we'll check back in 2032. Finally,
it might take 10 years, I think, for this to happen. But
this is 2032, so I think we're on the same page to see whether it happens or not. Let's put we can put a can of juice on this. Also, can you talk about your most portable version of the ideal scope?
So I think, John, you were there when I first showed this. We were at a Vegas conference and I walked up to a De Beers window and you took a photograph of me. This was probably a decade or more ago.
I remember.
So we are going to be giving away 3 of these, I believe, today. And Andre and I, PriceScope CEO, are talking about making this available to PriceScopers. So there'll be more to see, but essentially you hold your ring up and you look at it. You can put it in your shirt pocket. You can put it in your handbag. It's not quite as good as the real thing, but its portability makes it a real little gem.
Absolutely right.
On the back.
That's really cool. Okay, Gary, thank you. I would like you to please stay with us if you would. But at this time, and by the way, may I remind our audience members, we're still taking questions. Please send questions in via the chat. We've got some that were asked ahead of time that we're going to get to, but by all means, if you have questions about anything that I've presented, that Gary is presenting or we're about to hear from our concierge, then fire them away. For a live search demonstration, I would like to pass the conch to our PriceScope concierge and a previous webinar guest, also with a hit list of credentials. Will you please welcome Dave Atlas? Mr. Dave, take it away.
Well, I'm glad to see we have some people here, and it's always nice to sit down and think you're going to be just a panelist and turn out that you hear a conversation that Gary started and start to learn things again. So it's always good to review, and there's just a lot of new people all the time, and we are trying our best as the concierge to help people find what they want. I want to talk to you about how to use the search function for diamonds in a way that I use it. I get quite a bit of frequent use out of it, trying to help people find what they want to buy. And so I set up kind of a common series of searches, and I have them pre-packaged for you, but I want to go through them with you. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and we'll see where that one is. Let's see. Here we are. Okay. Now, I think we're on the right screen. Everybody is seeing the screen share, I hope.
We're seeing it, Dave.
Okay. Typically, this would be just a typical kind of search that people would look for. A round stone, say they're looking for a 1.25-carat round diamond, and they're looking for like an E to G range of color, and a VS type stone, VVS2 to SI1 is what I put in the search, but they're looking in the mid ranges in a sense, and they typically in PriceScope, people are searching for well-cut diamonds, and that's what they're going to find here. You have a much greater chance of finding a well-cut diamond on PriceScope than on 1 in 5 or 1 in 5 in 100 chance. So this is a great spot to find something that you won't necessarily find in the low end or the normal commercial ball type situation. So let's go through the search because I know there's some issues. You pick your shape over on the left side of your screen, and the price I just left open. It goes from $1 to $1 million. Right now, we're going to have a series of searches. Client had said they were looking for a quarter to 149. But when I make that first search, I extend the higher weight. I extended it up to 155. I can't imagine someone saying, well, 149, I really want one just below 1.5 carats, and I would never consider 155. So I raise it up a little bit over that bump point. And as far as HCA cut rank, that's such a handy tool to weed out problem stones that I put it up at the excellent range. And most diamonds on PriceScope seem to be in that excellent range, although there are certainly very good and good ones. Color, E to G, like we had, said that they were looking for. Right now, I did not check any of the labs, but I did below that check AGS 0, GIA XXX, and of course there are some times where GIA will have a good or very good in one of the polish or symmetry and still rate a stone excellent, but I put GIA XXX, so that eliminates any issues there. And then this filter off and on, that's an important element. The advanced filter is something that I think people don't know how to use or avoid using, or it takes them several searches till they discover that it's there. And I fill in limiters that I've come up with. It's personal taste, along with knowing that there are diamonds that are too deep in my mind, and I put 62 3/4 as the maximum depth. You could put 63 if you wanted to see those. Minimum depth, I put 60. There's plenty of GIA triple excellence at 59, but I put 60. 54 to 59 for the table, I think is possible to have quite a nice stone within that range, and still keep it to the side of the excellent and ideal stones that are out there. Symmetry, excellent, ideal. Polish, excellent, ideal. And I put none to medium for fluorescence. I think that's the least controversial zone. And there are reasons why fluorescence can be good, which I've known about a long time and tried to convince people. Now, finally, there is a growing trend to understand fluorescence better and to also understand transparency better. That's not fluorescence related. Those issues that come up with a little bit of cloudiness sometimes. And then we're ready to go. Now, notice down here, ISIMG, which I didn't check off, is ideal scope images. And we're going to make use of that in a later search. So I did the search and I came up with quite a few stones that have potential. 119 stones that are in-house and vetted. And it's populated with a great number of choices from B to C and white flash. There's plenty of choices, 119 stones. And down in the bottom of the search, you have 509 stones in virtual inventory. James Allen, Blue Nile, Dimore, lots of choices. So you have a beginning, but what you have to look at, there was a budget involved. And the budget that I was given, although it's not on this search, was $12,000. Well, what you do have here, there's as much as 23,000 on this one. And down here on the ones that are virtual, there's prices in here that are in the 20s as well. There's a 23,000 there. So you're going to see stones that are out of the budget, way out. And you can sort by price by clicking and letting it feed in the search in a different way. This is the most expensive ones at the top now. There's one that's 32,000 there and 32 below it. But if you click it again, you're going to get a reverse least expensive to most expensive. So now you see that it is possible at a $12,000 budget to find some of the diamonds. Well, now how do you separate? That's too many stones for a consumer to just go through. It's well over 600 stones that need to be looked at. So what we want to do is get up here at the top of my screen, which I can't do. Let's pull it down a little bit. There we go. Okay. I'll put it back up. This is a second search that I constructed from that search. And the way to save a search so that you can reconstruct it is to go to this little icon at the top of the screen. See the little 3 dots on rods? If you click it, a URL comes up and there's the word copy. If you left click copy, you've saved that search. You have a URL saved on your clipboard and you can save that search and reopen it without altering it.
Dave, I want to touch on this a second because that's really important. That's basically, you could use that in a forum thread. You could preset a search And then you could use that in a forum thread if you're a PriceScope community member. You could send it via text to someone if you wanted to. I mean, basically, it saves the entire search that you've pulled up, and you can duplicate it anywhere.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Very, very powerful tool because when you're struggling with the details of the search and you don't want to vary and you want to expand or contract the search to try to nail down to what your budget is, you need to be able to save that search so you can go back and recreate the original search and then make alterations over and over again. And you can save a series of searches. So that's what I've done, is create an initial search. Now we're on the second search. And here you'll see I have a $12,000 budget plugged in. Now, I did $12,000 because that was what the consumer theoretically said their budget was. In truth, when I do a search as the concierge, I would probably put 12,300 or something like that, so that stones that are very, very close in price to a $12,000 budget would show up. I've had any number of people give me a budget constraint and then willingly go from 12 to 14 or $15,000 to find what they really want to buy. But this is a good suggestion to a person that really does have a budget. You want to be just a little higher. That way you get all the choices in there without really going through the budget roof. I didn't change anything else. All the other things are the same. Everything was left the way it was. But now you have 29 stones in-house and only 34 stones in virtual inventory. But they're all $12,000 or less. And that makes, well, you're almost home. You have few enough that you could look at all of them if you wanted to. And you'd never see that many stones in a store, all within that range and with a real competitive situation. And many of them will have the ability to have an ideal scope image. If you want one, you can get one from them. And the best part is, I think that they all have an HCA score, which in virtually every case that are the ones that are showing here, they're all excellent. So you have a real shot at getting a great diamond.
Matter of fact, Dave, can we, if you can click on one of those HCA Excellence, it'll actually take you to the score. And this is free within the search. I know you're normally limited to a certain number of HCA.
Oh, yeah.
But this is free within the search.
Yeah. And this has a nice score, 1.8. It's an average size. And average is just fine compared to small.
Yeah.
I think that I'd be content with an average size stone that's really cut well. A little bit bigger is no harm, but I think that this is probably going to be a stone that's going to generate no issue. It's not overly deep, it has a good table.
And the nice thing about stones that are cut this well on the HCA and have edge-to-edge brightness and ideal scope is the average spread is no problem, because when you take them into a low lit environment, they remain bright from edge to edge. So they appear visually larger than stones that might have a wider spread, but not be cut as well. So there's a lot of advantage here, and that's super information. You know, the thing about this, Dave, that I would ask is, when people are looking, as it relates to our topic, at some of the cut focused sellers who publish ideal scopes online, would you comment as to basically the quality level of imaging they're seeing versus what Garry was describing in the real world?
Yeah, well, in terms of the ideal scope image themselves.
Yes, sir.
The ideal scope image that you're shown, of course, you're looking at the best of the best usually when they use an ideal scope image in their sales, but they're using the right photographic equipment. which I don't have, and I'd be thrilled to death to get as good an image as Gary's getting with, or John's getting with his iPhone. Those are as good as you're going to get. They're going to not be so red in general as the ones that you get online, but you can analyze the ones that you get from the ideal sellers. You can analyze them very, very precisely. They're crisp. I only wish I had the right equipment to make those images myself.
We're about ready to move to the Q&A, Dave. Did you have anything else? This is really thorough. I appreciate this.
Okay, well, if I'm going a little bit too long, I'll stop. But I do have the third search that I wanted to.
No, let's absolutely.
I just want to touch on that. The third search is nothing different except I checked off ideal scope image. And when you get down to on this particular one, because we were at the $12,000 was just not quite right. So I have two from White Flash that do have ideal scope images. And of course, they're fabulous looking stones. The thing is, if you take this number, 12,000, and you put 16,000, well, now you have quite a few more. They all say White Flash, so there's a James Allen, and it's an AGS stone though, and so probably there's going to be an ideal scope image there, or they'll get it for you. But virtually all these stones will have. Now this one won't because it's a GIA, but all the AGS stones will have ideal scope images, and that's how you can find things. And that's what makes the world go round when you're searching for a diamond on PriceScope.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we're about ready to move to Q&A. And I do want to remind everybody, we have some questions that are preloaded. It would be great if we can bring Garry back on. And Dave, if you want to stop sharing. Thank you, sir. You're ahead of me. And we've got a few questions here. So let's jump into those. By the way, I do want to mention that when you click on the ideal scope image in the search, you can actually go see the ideal scopes that are posted, that those sellers have posted. So if you were to take that step another step, then you would be able to see all the different information that the seller
be right
has,
there,
including the ideal scope. Cool. So there's a question for Garry here. What would you tell consumers who are looking for a pear shape or a marquee or an oval and trying to avoid a bow tie? Is the ideal scope sufficient for that?
The ideal scope will show you whether a stone has a bow tie, because when you put your eye there, or in the case of the camera, the bow tie will show up as a black pattern more consistently than it will from a straight photograph, because the thing that causes a bow tie is you. People need to sort of understand that the size of a camera lens or the size of your head is what creates the bow tie. So the best way to explain what a bow tie is take a piece of white paper, poke a hole in it with a pen so that you've got a little peephole, and look at the diamond, and you will see that there is no bow tie. A diamond that has a bow tie will now appear to be pure white. So what we can see in an ideal scope photograph will show us whether the diamond has a bow tie. However, the difference between the ideal scope and the asset scope, which I predict is the next question, is an asset scope will show that bow tie as being blue, because it's that blue part in the asset scope. The advantage for an asset scope for any fancy shaped diamond is that instead of just the red light or the pink light showing up, you've now got the green and the red. So yes, you can use an ideal scope, and you can use the ideal scope card, as a really good selection system, but the thing with an asset scope is that lots of the light will be green. Lots of the light that's coming back to you will be coming from the green part. And what that means is that you're getting light from windows and walls, which is usually not as good as getting light from up on the ceiling.
Yeah,
So
asset scope, by the way, for me, a prerequisite class to understand asset is ideal scope. And once you understand the ideal scope fundamentals, then adding the color is not a bridge too far. But sometimes trying to explain asset as the introductory tool, it gets people a little confused. So hopefully this one is what we would call a gateway drug for better understanding.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. So what about round, like antique cuts? Will the ideal scope help you with rounds that are of the older style, the old European, old miners, or transitionals?
Can I go first, and then we'll let Dave, whose nickname is Old Miner,
yep.
go second. So the thing with the ideal scope is that with pretty well any fancy shaped diamond, I like to rock the diamond. Now, a lot of old cut diamonds are going to show a lot of darkness, way more darkness in an ideal scope, same as they will show more blue in an asset scope. So what I like to do is understand the psyche of the person who likes those old cuts. And one of the things they like is the big bang fire. So this is very hard with a still photograph, but if you actually have the capacity to see the stone in person, then what I like to do is I like to rock the stone and see what happens, see whether those big black areas in the stone change quickly, because if they change quickly to red, then in that transition, they will get what they really want, which is those big, bold flashes of fire. Dave, over to you.
That's as well expressed as I've ever heard it. People need to keep in mind that most old cut stones were not engineered with the thought or the knowledge of what it takes to make a really highly efficient light reflecting product. So they're a product of a different day and age. And it also gives you insight into what that individual likes. There's nothing that says you couldn't create a diamond like an old mine diamond that gives you tremendous punchy sparkle like you're talking about, and saying this is an ideal old miner, but there's no agreement as to what that would be. So the only thing we can do is go like, here's one that modern stones, these maximize light return, and they're going to be very sparkly because of the way they're constructed. And that's what this tool efficiently does. And I've used the ideal scope on old cut stones to do what Garry suggested, but never realized that anybody, maybe other than Garry, would want to do it. And I do think that that is why people like them, because the stones do have this blocky light return that has a definite appeal to some eyes and not necessarily to everybody.
That's a great point. I've used ideal scope with older stones, and the most useful information is that contrast pattern information that you get from it. And it's absolutely, you're not looking for that brightness intensity, but what you're looking for is you want some basic light return, but you're really looking for those big, bold flashes that people love about those stones.
Yeah. The big, if I can just finish off, John. So the big, bold flash must change quickly. That's the really crucial thing. If it just sits there, like in the example of the really deep stone on the right-hand side of your display of that really deep cut diamond, that black just stays there. So what we want is that quick transition. because what happens during that quick transition from black to red is that in the black, you go through the fire. You start off at the blue from the black as you move the stone, and you work your way through to the red, and then you get the pure white in the middle of that flash. So, and then you'll go back to black. So it's that transition that creates the really strong fire, which is what the old cut people are all about. Huge, great, big flashes occasionally, not as often as around brilliant, but huge, big flashes that knock your socks off.
And that you actually get to see multiple colors from one flash, which isn't the case with when you have the smaller fans of dispersion. Super. So there, I love this question. Is there an etiquette or a protocol that a shopper should follow when asking to use an ideal scope they've brought into a store? Absolutely there is. In fact, I would say, first of all, now I did this as a consumer and I've done it countless times as a professional, introducing ideal scope into an environment where it is either they're not familiar with it or they just don't have it. The first thing I would say is I wouldn't, you don't force anybody to do anything. You wouldn't ask them if you could, set the diamond in your own setting before, they sold it to you or anything like that. So I always introduce it to them and I invite them to use it first and, and say, have you ever seen this tool? No. And it just shows light behavior. Red is brightness. I'd love to use it on some of your diamonds. Can I show you how to use it? And then you show me. And so it's always done in the store with me the way that I showed a picture of Garry assessing a diamond with tweezers. And you make sure that the girdle plane is solid with the base of the cone. And then you find very even soft white light to use as a background. This dovetails into another question, which is what's the best lighting condition to use it in? Spotlighting is not super great because you've got, especially if it's on one side of you, you can actually make it very uneven and inconsistent. So even lighting from above and even backlighting in a live situation has been the key, at least for me. And talking to a professional and asking them to use it first with their own diamonds, never been refused on that, by the way. Some of them weren't super happy with the analysis of the diamond, but the bottom line is at least they're participating in the process that way and they're comfortable. So that's my advice. Garry, how about that? And Dave, in terms of best environments and approach?
So simply how to look at the ring, because when you're in a shop, it's most likely that you're going to be looking at an actual ring. So here I have a ring. And here I have the ideal scope card, and I'm going to hold the stone up so that the light is reflecting. You can see down here, the pink isn't very bright. Up here, there's a light globe up there. So same.
You know what? That's a great opportunity for a shout out, Garry. Even in the PowerPoint slides that I showed you today, it does show light coming through the translucent cone and then coming up to the viewer, but a lot of that color is actually coming from inside the cone, and the same principle as Garry just showed you. So that's super important to know. The color is being reflected.
Yeah, and so what we want to do is to have that light shining into the scope, right, so that the scope has got lots of light, because then we've got uniform light all the way around. And so then the other thing is that you don't hold the ring like this and look like that, because you're blocking so much of the light. You hold the ring with the tips of your fingers so lots and lots of light can get into the scope, whichever scope it is, and then you'll get the best overall result. Dave, anything to add?
No, I'm good. I'm good on it.
Okay, so another question here is, in addition to etiquette of use with tradespeople, there's interest in using the scopes in store settings. Basically, in terms of mounted stones, I think we've seen, Garry, you kind of walked us through that. For unset stones, we can use our phones to take images, but when analyzing set stones, is there a way that you can get a decent image, or is that tricky? Seems like it's tricky to me. I don't know that I've tried to do that before.
Okay, so if you take your phone and you go to YouTube and you search for white screen, then your phone will become a backlight, right? If you have some tweezers, this makes it easier. You can set the ring into some tweezers, but somehow or other, if you put the ring on top of your telephone so that it's sitting straight up with the light behind it, and you then, I can't do this because I don't have enough hands. So
yeah, you're creating a light panel.
Yeah. So I've now got a background and I can put the scope over the top of the ring with the light coming from the phone below, and Bob's your uncle.
So that's really useful advice right there. I'm curious here. I did get a question here. There was a concierge request, apparently. Dave said that there was somebody asking if Ideal Scope works on a yellow radiant. Is there a standard for that? And
I said to them, no, it's not part of that system. That radiants to begin with are a problem all among to themselves, but that if you're looking for a yellow stone, then you want one that has as much yellow as the cutter can create in that stone by shaping it properly. And that's going to cause some dark areas in the stone that you wouldn't want if it was a colorless stone. So they're really at odds with each other. It's not for that use.
I've had many discussions with David Friedlander, Rock Diamond, many years ago, a decade or more ago, about asset scope. And eventually I managed to explain to David, who's probably watching, that the best tool for selecting fancy colored diamonds is the asset scope. And what you actually want is absolutely no blue, or if it's an ideal scope, no black, because that black will show up as dark zones and it will make the diamond look ugly. So we want as little black as possible. And again, if you've got the stone in tweezers or a ring and you can rock it, that's a good idea too, because if there is a little bit of a dark patch and it goes away quickly, that's fantastic. And almost the more leakage that there is, the better the stone will be if it's a fancy colored diamond. So it's the exact opposite of what you're looking for in a round diamond.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are coming right up to an hour right now. We've got, I see one more question here. Any possibility of an Ideal Scope reference guide that's easy to carry around? And yes, I have an answer for that. In the PriceScope education section, actually in the resources section, you can go to our Ideal Scope page. There's a new video there covering some of what we've discussed today. And there's a reference chart. You can screenshot it and put it on your phone. And now you have a reference chart and a backlight ready to go on your next Ideal Scope journey. We're going to be selecting 3 names at random to give away a few of Garry's new portable toy. And Garry, do you want to talk about the availability of those?
Well, I did make them initially for my own retail business, and I sent out, I think, about 10,000 of them to clients. So I have made them for PriceScope, and I think that there is a plan afoot to create some sort of super duper membership club. Maybe you might have to pay some money to be in that super duper club, but there will be benefits that will far outweigh the cost if that's the decision that that our lovely CEO makes. I think that at some point in the future we may be offering these. I'm currently remaking the Ideal Scope website. I had hoped that it would be done by now, but like all things development associated, it isn't. But we will also be selling these on Ideal Scope website. And I think we might even come up with some packages that if you're buying a regular Ideal Scope, you can get one of these at a super duper price. So they're not going to be expensive.
Spectacular.
And they are incredibly useful because you can just have them lying around and sitting in your pocket, in your handbag, whatever.
Well, I do think just dovetailing off of that, by the way, thanks for the teaser. That's good information for price scopers. I would also say that just the growing popularity, you know, whether you choose to buy or sell the laboratory grown diamond option, just the fact that there's this surge of popularity and the fact that one of the largest sellers of lab grown already uses Ideal Scope, I hope that we see more proliferation of this tool because it's very friendly to that particular segment. And so there's not really resistance. The resistance in the natural trade has been, yeah, that tool kind of shows it's a little bit too critical, but you don't necessarily have that obstacle in the LGD sector. So that's, I think, a benefit for everybody, Garry, the consumer, et cetera. Mr. Atlas, can't thank you enough for your wisdom and experience. And of course, our developer of the Ideal Scope, Mr. Holloway, and greatest thanks, first of all, to our sponsors, the PriceScope sponsors, who you can find on our sponsor page. They bring you all of these webinars, so we appreciate their investment. And most of all, we really thank all of you who are watching today. You are the fabric of the community, and we appreciate your interest. If you're not a member, come become a member and join that community fabric. Thanks a lot, everybody. We will see you next time.